Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. We are so excited to be here today and kick off our conversation on community building this month. So we have Mr. Joe Toliver here with us. Hey, Joe, you know it's always
Hey,
awesome
what's
when you
going
come on
on?
with
How you
us.
guys doing today?
All right, all right. And then I know we may our guest may be hopping on. I know he has a conference that he's attending. So we're gonna jump right into the conversation today. If you're here, go ahead and drop a hey, good morning in the chat box. Let us know that you are here. If you're catching us on replay, give us a hashtag replay in the chat box so that we know that you're tuning in and catching up on the conversation on community building. And don't forget to invite your friends to the group. Go ahead and tag them in. Remember, if they're not a part of the group, you have to invite them first and then tag them into this conversation where we're going to be talking about community building. So it is the first of the month. I can't believe it's September 1st already. And we're going into a whole new topic. Last month, just for a quick recap, we talked about fundraising or friend raising for the entire month and being intentional when it comes to going to different events and friend raising. So today we're going to talk about community building. And Joe, I just wanted us to kind of talk about the importance of community building for nonprofit organizations, especially when it comes to building support and other areas within their community.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, hi, Lashina. Thanks for having me on. You know, you definitely have to have a essential tool in community building in order to bring folks to the table. And I mean, it goes from a range from not just your board members, but even your volunteers and also the folks that you want to target in terms of community building. If you don't have a plan in place that's intentional, that is also sustainable, because folks will remember if you come into their community and you leave either before you get the work done or after you've done your project. Typically, people want you in their community because they trust you to come in and do what you say you're going to do, and you're going to support them. And they really want you there long term. So it takes on a lot of components to make community building work. But I think what is most essential is that when you're doing community work, that you and your organization be as authentic as you possibly can. When you go into communities, they really want to trust those folks. And sometimes if you go in and you say something and you don't live up to it, those community folks will remember that. And it'll make it very hard for you to enter the community again or even get your project done. So community building is essential. There are some pieces to the puzzle that we could talk about, like establishing what community needs are, establishing what the readiness of a community is. So those are very important essentials as well.
Love it. So, okay, you talked about building the community trust. What are some ways to do that?
Well, the first thing you should know about building community trust is that when you're working within a community, it is about working together. It's about collaboration, right? But in order to have collaboration, you must first have vulnerability. And oftentimes, because of the competitive nature of nonprofits, that collaboration is much more difficult because the vulnerability is not there. And again, trust, because the dollars are so thin, and not having a good plan on how they could share in the resources of a community, oftentimes not only doesn't allow collaboration, but put organizations at odds, when oftentimes they're doing the same work and they would benefit the participants or the clients that they're serving if they work together, because they each could be bringing different components to the pie to make it whole. And that's what community work is about, making the community whole. And it does take a lot of holistic approaches to make that happen as well. And a part of community building really looks at the readiness of a community, right? How ready are you to receive these programs? How ready are you to receive these dollars? How ready is your community for changes that may happen because of new buildings may be coming, a new roadway may be coming, or you may be having challenges like areas like Mississippi today, who are dealing with water that they can't even use. So community building is essential. Collaboration and vulnerability all play an intricate part, expressly looking at a community's readiness, right? And so those are very important tools that we use in community building.
That's awesome. One thing I think about is when starting Love Our Youth back in 2012, at that time, there was a lot of discussion around the impact, the importance of community building, not that that doesn't continue, but also using the, at that time, a heavy model for that was discussed was using the collective impact framework. So as a result of that, we ended up taking that model and adopting it as one of our programs, where it's that same concept. There's that backbone organization, which is kind of the glue, which we Love Our Youth serves as the backbone organization. And then there's the other organizations that the whole goal is we bring all of our resources together so that we have a greater impact on our community versus, let's say, the business owner who wants to teach the youth about entrepreneur. That's not their day-to-day thing, but they don't mind investing the dollars in it. Or the youth program that want to have an entrepreneur program come in, but don't have the time to, to facilitate the program. So it's like, but there's that volunteer at that corporation who that's what they did, or the local college, that's what they teach, and they just want to be able to invest that time. So bringing all of those people together, our role as backbone is bringing all those people together so that we're working towards a common goal, because we know we're much stronger together than we are alone. So it's that whole concept of that community building, us coming together. And we make it our practice that anything that we do, typically you will not see just our organization in doing it. You'll always see some partners and other key stakeholders involved in order to make it a success. And oftentimes as organizations, we kind of get caught into wanting to do it alone, or not collaborating. We might have, we may have the same mission as another organization, but you're right, we have to be vulnerable to be able to ask that organization, hey, what are your needs? And maybe you have what can fill their needs, and together bring your resources together to have a greater impact on community.
Especially if you look at it in terms of, if I work with another organization, if I tend to lean towards collaborating, I have more of an opportunity to really get more done for my community. I mean, I get more opportunities to serve them in different capacities, because not everybody understands in the same way. And so having a diverse group of organizers focused in on one community challenge or several community challenges, I mean, it's just a unique opportunity that most communities don't get a chance to do because of the fear of collaboration. But collaboration is a key component of community building, but also community assessment. And one of the things in the assessment tool is to kind of assess, well, if you're trying to do some programming, especially prevention programming, if I'm going to do some assessment in my community to kind of see what needs, are there, or what challenge that we're faced, listen, bringing the right people to the table really benefits. And I'll tell you how I've done it in the past. We try to look at, even when we're developing our board, we try to look at what the 12 sectors for community change, right? Looking at each sector within the community. But that's also in community building as well. You look at those different sectors within your community, and you balance them against the challenges that your community is facing. And you ask the very important question, whether or not these agencies can play a contributing role in helping you put some prevention or intervention activities into play. And that is how you typically try to build a coalition or a task force of community folks to start the process of working together. You find something that you're both interested in terms of the challenge in the situation, that your organizations have some, foothold in, that they've been doing some work around, and you look at these organizations. So, for example, if you had an organization that was looking to do some prevention services around homelessness, who would you invite to the table? Who would be a part of your task force? Who could be a contributing factors in making an impact in the homelessness in your community? And that's how you begin to kind of develop who these partners, who these collaborators are. And so if you think about homelessness, who engages homeless people more than anyone? And that would be the police department, correct? What about Parks and Rec, since many of them hang out at the park or live at the park? There are so many different. What about hospitals, because they're taking them in intake? clinics. So that's how you begin to kind of chart out, well, who are possible collaborators?
Right.
It's a part of your assessment, your community assessment that you do. Now you're looking at all these different organizations that are within your community that are doing the same or similar work that you're doing, or you can find a connection between some of the challenges that some of the folks that you're serving are having and those in those organizations. And you develop a bridge that folks can cross over and begin to work together. And I think that is the most intricate and most important piece of community building that you can have when you have organizations in one community with the willingness to actually collaborate on projects to help that community, what you say, grow and go.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So community building is intricate.
So I'm just thinking about, so you conducted a community assessment. You're kind of taking a look at what resources are in the community, and what's needed in the example that you gave to like tackle like homelessness, right? Now what? Like, sometimes organizations don't have the capacity to bring those people together. What would you recommend? Like, I want to see like the two sides. One, if you have the capacity, what are some things you can do to kind of start that conversation and put action behind it? And then the other part of it is, if you don't have the capacity, you might not have the capacity to conduct all these meetings, or, a lot of our founders are wearing multiple hats. What are some ways that they can still have that conversation or pull that together and be involved in community building, but at the same time managing,
the collaboration? I think one of the most important pieces of the collaboration is to make sure that when you're approaching other organizations to partner, that you stress that you're not going to lose your organizational identity. And I think that's a big fear for a lot of organizations. I don't want to merge into who you are. I still want to maintain my mission. I still want to maintain my vision. But I do want to collaborate on this issue. And I think that is key in helping organizations come together when they know they don't have to get rid of their identity. They don't have to change who they are and the work that they do to collaborate. And so that's, I think, a very important message that you can pass along to potential organizations that you'd like to collaborate with. And I also think that it's also important to establish memorandums of understanding where you're clearly outlining what that relationship would be and how you would move it forward. So those are very important things. When you think about community building, you think about readiness, and you're thinking about assessing that community. You think about building the capacity of that community. And a part of what we're talking about in terms of collaboration and community building is the capacity, right? We're working towards capacity building. We say in fundraising, we check for people whether they have the will and the capacity, right? And so it's the same approach when you think about other nonprofit organizations in your community. Do they have the capacity to do the work that you need them to partner with you with? And do they have the will to do it? And sometimes that's a little maneuvering. Sometimes that takes time. But more than anything else, collaboration takes trust. And just like any relationship, you must start on the premise that you guys will trust each other and you have each other's best interests at heart. Because at the core of it, you're there to serve the people. You're there to give those people a hand up in the challenges that they're facing in their life. If it's not the individual, it's the entire community. So yes, your assessment, capacity building, implementing your programs. And then if you think about all of that, you have to also wrap cultural competency around it. And if Cobra was on the call or on this right now, he would be talking very intently about the importance through all.
I think we lost Joe. All right, he's probably gonna hop back in. If you're tuning in and you're hearing this conversation, go ahead and what are some ways that you conduct community building within your community? There are so much things that was shared. I mean, we talked about your organization being vulnerable, your organization being open to collaboration, conducting a community assessment as to what's going on within your community. There's just so much different pieces. So go ahead and drop some ways that you're doing and conducting community building within your organization. Another thing while Joe hops back on is I wanted to talk about, he mentioned establishing memorandums of understanding. If you do not, especially newer organization, or sometimes not even just newer, sometimes we get into relationships and new partnerships and we don't think as much about, okay, having that agreement in place so that we understand, okay, this is your role and this is my role within the partner, within this partnership that we're going to be working together on. So one thing I want you to think about is, are you putting MOUs, memorandums of understanding in place within your organization? And if not, consider doing that. And the reason why it's so good to do that is because both organizations are establishing an understanding as to what my role is in this partnership agreement. A lot of times when I sign partnership agreements, one of the things is it's a good way so that, let's say a MOU may come my way and my interpretation of what we were doing together is different from what's in that MOU. So then that's that time for us to have that conversation, hash out those details, put in an agreement, and then we have that formal MOU in place. So I know a lot of times we just easily kind of say, hey, yeah, let's just go ahead. We're going to have this event together, or we're going to run these programs together. But having an MOU in place can be very helpful within your organization. And not only that, when you're going after funds, being able to show that you have these partnership agreements in place does help support some of your grant applications. So definitely, if you're not doing MOUs, and that's probably a whole nother live in itself, look into doing MOUs with your partners. And even, let's say you haven't done it yet, you can go back and start telling them, hey, you know, I want to strengthen the relationship and the partnership that we have with one another. And in addition, this is a way for us to seek additional funds so that we can collaborate and do more things together. Would you mind entering into a memorandum of understanding with us? So if you have to back up and do it, go ahead, back up, but just do it. And a lot of partners understand that, because, you know, organizations are familiar with entering these agreements. So definitely check that out. And that's probably alive in itself. And I know we're getting close to ending, but if you have any questions, feel free and drop them into the chat box. Today was a great day to kick off the conversation of community building. We're going to talk about this throughout the month. Next week, I'm going to come on and talk about some of the foundational pieces of community building. We have ACES Matters that will be joining us later and talking about that community building component, along with some of the things that she's doing around community building. So definitely check out. We have Jalen coming back talking about the importance of community building, and we're going to see it from a PR lens. So definitely check that out and come on in and join us throughout the month. So this month, this is just kicking off the conversation of community building, but we are going to be talking about this all month. So definitely check that out. All right, we have Joe coming back in. Hey, there we go. Thought we lost you.
Yeah, you lost me for a second.
That's all right. We just went over the notes, and I kind of remind everyone what, conversation, what we're doing for the week. So yes, something that I did talk about while you were out, because you mentioned establishing memorandums of understanding. So I talked about that a little, just because it's so easy to, let's say, hey, we're going to partner together, but forget about that putting at least that agreement in place so that we understand what this partnership looks like.
Right.
That's probably a lot in itself. Right. Being
it talks about intention. Yeah. Yeah. No, the memorandum of understanding is really important as well. But I think I was going to start talking a little bit about the cultural competency. Yes. Of, and I think in every stage of the community building piece, I will remind folks to look at cultural competence. Look at, in terms of assessing that you're assessing a diverse pool of people who live within that community. And make sure, oftentimes we don't want to, we don't engage younger people. And I think that's a mistake as well, that we should be surveying, looking at young people and their experience within that community and what they see are challenges, and also what they see as benefits of that community. So I do think that a part of the assessment, and when you think about capacity building and you think about cultural competence, everybody who's sitting on that task force, or who's every organization that are part of your the collaboration that you're trying to build, I think that is very important that you key in and log into this idea of folks chiming in to be able to look at and say, hey, we got to make sure that we're looking at not only this community, but the people who are in the community, but that we also, as a task force or a coalition, that we represent that cultural competence as well, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I wanted to also share. I see Cobra has jumped on the line.
Yes,
bring him on
Cobra. In. Cobra, hey.
Hey, Cobra.
We got to unmute you.
Hello.
Hey guys, the expert just entered the room.
Yes.
Hey. I'm gonna turn it over completely to you, Cobra. Hey, Cobra, we got a chance to talk a little bit about community building, and we talked about the importance of collaboration, and we talked about the importance of, it takes a little bit of vulnerability in order to make that happen. But we also talked about cultural competency, and that's where I'd like you to pick it up, Cobra, because I talked about how cultural competency actually is able to have a place across all aspects of community building and assessments and capacity building and sustainability. You always are looking at implementation. You always want to be looking at how culturally competent you are in all those areas when you're doing community building. So if from the guy who's done community building from DC to Africa to Dubai, please chime in and give us a couple of insights in terms of how important community coalition is, especially when it comes to cultural competence.
Can y'all hear me?
We can.
Okay. So first of all, I want to thank Lashina and Mr. Toliver for looking out. I just want to tell everybody my apologies. I'm attending a conference. And yesterday, I was so ready. I thought this thing was yesterday. I was like, "Where's everybody at?" And then whatever happened today. And I appreciate the thought when we think about cultural competence. One of the main things about cultural competence is the fact that it's a process, and part of that process is my own awareness of my culture. So, what are the values of my culture? What are the things that and how do those values show up? In most cultures, we know that family and loved ones is important, but the way we express those things are differently. So I identify as Haitian African American. So when I'm with my parents, showing respect to them and making sure that I greet everyone when I walk in the room, making sure I say everybody's name. That's a sign of respect. And that's the thing that our culture does to show an awareness of who we are and what we do. Other cultures may be different. And so another piece of cultural competence is having knowledge of our own culture, really thinking about why we do certain things, and then being able to compare and contrast those values and the way we show up with different cultures. So when I went away to school to Tennessee, I felt some type of way when people wasn't greeting me. Like, you don't see me, like you ain't talking to me, like you don't. We wasn't just in class, right? But that's not necessarily. It didn't mean that they didn't value me, but that mannerism, the way that shows up, is a little different. And so when we start thinking about our culture and comparing, contrasting other cultures, and not necessarily any culture is bad, is just saying that this is how we show up and this is how we show up differently. Another thing, when we think about cultural competency, and it's a process, all right, values, how we show up, how we compare and contrast, but what is my knowledge of your culture? Like, how much do I know about your culture, and how much do I celebrate your culture, right? There was this one time, and so in Haitian culture, New Year's is for a lot of cultures, New Year's is big, but for Haitian culture specifically, New Year's is the Independence Day. And so if you if you want to get on my best side, it's telling me Happy New Year's and Happy Haitian Independence Day, because that's what's critical. And because you did your own research, because you work with people who are from different cultures, you know that experience and you know that's important. And so therefore you extend those greetings. So when we think about that. And so again, knowing our own cultures, knowing other people's cultures, comparing, contrasting those cultures, knowing those cultures good enough and well enough where we can begin to think about how do we appreciate and show up in the ways in which other people in different cultures experience. And then thinking about, all right, how in solidarity move in a way that uplifts somebody's culture for the change that we want, to see. So being in communion, being in community with other people from different cultures for a common goal, for advocacy, for something that's much bigger than ourselves, and being okay where like, yo, we don't do that in my culture. Yo, this is how we show up. Could you try to show up in this way? If you go to my parents' house and they offer you food, eat it. Like, don't say no, just eat it. Because
even creamos, no.
Even the cremas.
Yeah, that too. Oh.
Just sip
you might
it.
have
Just
to do a
sip
little
it.
negotiating on that.
Just sip it. Just sip it. I'll drink the rest for you. So, I mean, cultural competency is a process. And so us knowing that it's a process, us knowing that you got to be patient and graceful with yourself, but you also have to be willing. You have to be willing to learn other people's culture, so that way we can create that community.
What was community building like for you, Cobra, when you did some of your work in Africa? I think it was Nigeria you were in, right? What are the distinctions between working with groups, international groups, and working with groups here locally? Because you've done both.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Joe. And I think something that translates everywhere is respect. So, and then in humility. I think those are the two things that serve me well when you're international. One, respecting people, like accepting this is their country, this is how they live. You know what I mean? So it's not for me to judge. And then being humble, like, what does this mean? Why do you all do this? What could I do better? That respect and humility took me in the projects that we do much further because of those two things. I realized that in order for community leaders to work with me, in order for community leaders to be a part of the initiatives, I had to respect them, and I had to show humility.
Is that also applicable? You did that in Nigeria, but is that also applicable here locally in the state?
Yeah, it is applicable.
And is it more important to do it here as well?
I agree. I think what I had to do, I had to hone in on those skills. Where here, you can brush somebody off or whatever, and it's your country, you're here in the United States or whatever, but like I had to hone on those skills, which made me a better community builder, because I realized that if I take those two things with me in any community, like I'm gonna get some type of traction. So it's definitely afforded me a lot more success.
Man, Cobra, we've talked a little bit about cultural diversity as it applies to community building. We talked about how to engage different groups in terms of community building. And what is one thing that you like to share with our audience that you think is very intricate in their efforts in terms of community building?
I think community is everywhere. Are we tapping into it? And do we know what's our own role in community building? So one, am I tapping into the community that's around me? And then two, what is my role? Am I the cheerleader? Am I the organizer? Am I the person that connects people? And I think when you identify, and I don't think a lot of people think about that in that way.
Yeah, and no, I get you. And I guess if you think about the community. You grew up in an urban community, correct? But you do a lot of work in rural.
Yes, sir. Yes,
you know,
sir.
so what are the distinctions between rural and urban communities in the work that nonprofits do?
That's a phenomenal question.
I understand that there's a different dynamic, right?
Oh, of course. I think when it comes to rural communities, a lot more people and families are a lot more connected. So they know. So you can't go in like pointing fingers because that family, somebody knows that family. So it's a lot more delicate when you think about going into rural communities because people are more connected. When you think about urban communities, and I would also say with something with rural communities, there's a level of I guess pleasantries you have to definitely use and take part of. Where when you talk about more metropolitan or urban communities, again, everybody don't know each other, and what the stuff that makes you an expert and or makes you able to get people to partner with you is your level of knowledge, is your experience, it's your the things that you've worked on and how you show up. So I think when it comes to rural communities, my first thoughts are like, all right, what are the pleasantries or the niceness that I gotta play to get people on board? And then when I go into more metropolitan, I have to exert myself like, this is the things that I do, these are the things that I know, and these are the principles that we need to take in order to move forward. So I think those are probably, in my experience, the two major differences between rural communities and urban metropolitan communities.
Man, thank you so much, Kobe. You know, when I worked in the nonprofit arena, you know, I was trying to build 3 community coalitions. And 2 of the coalitions were communities that only a street separated. And all of the challenges that they faced were the same. But the folks at the table could not, for any reason at all, get along. Have you run across any scenarios like that? And if so, what are some things that you think that we could do to help reduce the tension and really help these folks understand the importance of collaboration? Yeah. You still there? You're on mute.
Oh yeah, I was just talking because you hit it, man. You hit it, and I think the number one thing, as you know, and as you have taught me in all these years, what is the common goal? So, like, what is the common ground? What is the one thing we can all agree on, and then work towards keeping that at the forefront? Because what I think and believe is, like, we all get wrapped up in what we know, what we have to do, and then forget that, this is the common ground are the youth. The common ground is mental health. The common ground is prevention of substance use and misuse. Like, sticking to the common ground and sticking to what we know that works. But that, yeah.
So in other words, you have a common unity.
Yes, sir. Yes,
which
sir.
is community.
Community.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Common unity. Yeah. Oh man, thanks a lot. That's important because oftentimes organizations can't find, because of the competitiveness, because of the lack of resources, oftentimes nonprofits can't find their way towards that common unity or that communion or that common good. It's very difficult to find that way when the resources are slim. And when we talk about community resources, hey, you're over there in DC. Are there any community resources that off the top of your head that you could throw out that help community buildings, help community builders build their capacity to do the work?
Most definitely. So this website is what this website is what consultants use. Like, when I'm with a community and I'm trying to figure something out, this is the website I go to. It's called Community Toolbox, Kansas State University. So if you Google Community Toolbox KU, it'll pop up, and everything you need to know about community building, it's on that website. And it gives definitely good information for those who just started doing the work. And then two, it gives a lot of good information from people who've been doing the work for years. So definitely Kansas University Community Toolbox, and it has everything comes down to advocacy, planning, but also just general like principles for good community. And that'll take you anywhere.
Right. You know, Kobe, it's something that you just said, and I know we're ending our time here, but there was one thing that you said and that you have been saying that I think a lot of nonprofits miss on, and that's the advocacy work. Oftentimes we're so in tune with doing the programming that we forget about the advocacy work. Could you, before you close out, talk a little bit about the importance of that?
I mean, that's my master's research, advocacy and community, right?
And everybody able now. Don't be starting throwing letters behind your name and everything.
Yeah. You said brought it up, so I had to. This is this is what I know, and I think with anything what people want in their communities, what they want from their governments, what they want from other people is like coming together and figuring out like what will we need to do to improve quality of life. What are the things that what are the gaps? What are the health disparities? What are the inequalities? What's the discrimination that's causing us not to reach our full potential and or really think about quality of life? So how do we continue to organize and stay organized? I think once we like achieve something, we all disband. Right. Well, we know that we have to continue staying organized, even if it's us meeting once a quarter. We know that we're going to be organized, we're going to stay together, and then we're going to improve the quality of life and make sure everybody can reach their full potential in our communities. So it's everything. To me, it's everything.
You bring up a very good point, sustainability. That's very important. And we started off kind of talking about once you go into a community, you committed to that community. You can't just stay long enough to finish your project or get some of your projects done and get out of there. You know, folks expect you to come for the long term and to live up to the work that you say that you're going to do. So we talked about that a little bit earlier. Hey, listen, Kobe, I can't tell you how much I appreciate, hearing the feedback from you on such a high level. I mean, you've done community building across the board. And so, I hope our audience was able to kind of get something from it, and I know that I did. So thank you for sharing. And Lashina, back to you.
Yes, and Cobra, well, thank you again for coming on. But before we close out, can you tell the audience about Prosper and Partners and a little bit about the work that you do? I know we didn't start there, but maybe we can end out there and then we'll close out the conversation for today.
Thank you. So Prosper and Partners, we're a management consulting firm. We help people work better together. And so when we think about professional development, facilitating a strategic planning process, how do we create professional development trainings to give your people the skills to reach your strategic goals? Helping people work better together is what we do. Thank you.
Love it. Love it. And we appreciate Prosper and Partners being this month's sponsor on the conversation of community building. So thank you. Yes. So, all right, everyone. So make sure that you tune in this month. This was the first session to kick off the conversation of community building. We have so much more planned. Joe's going to be coming on later on talking about the sectors for community change. There's so much different things that we're going to be having talking about this month. We appreciate you all tuning in as usual. We'll see you next Thursday. Cobra, Joe, thank you all so much.
Hey, we appreciate it, Lashina. Thanks, Cobra.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. You guys have a great one.
Everyone.